spook easily, Stone.
Have you ever explored the depths of fear? Have you ever wondered what depravity dwells within the imagination of a storyteller that prompts them to exhume horrors untold and expose those horrors to unsuspecting audiences? Some are repulsed, and some are shaken. However, there are those who are invigorated. So to those demented souls, we invite you to journey inward into the dark bowels of human imagination. Press play, and you will discover what's in the podcast.
It looked like a safe haven from the raging storm. Their hosts seemed like the essence of hospitality.
You can stay here as long as you like. Wonderful.
But appearances can be very deceiving.
I'm a doll maker. I make the most wonderful toys.
Pleasant dreams.
You're never too old to play with dolls. Until you're dead. Dolls.
And welcome back to another edition of What's in the Podcast. And today I am absolutely excited. I am chuffed. I am overjoyed. Not because of this atrocious mustache. That's another story for another day. No, it is because I have an incredibly wonderful friend, one whose friendship I've held very close to my heart these past couple of years, who is, in my opinion, a growing, powerful voice in the horror community, particularly in the realm of representation in the horror communities. Actually, you just hosted a panel at Midsummer Screams for, I believe, I think for all of it, BIPOC. I think for the whole thing, correct?
Yeah. BIPOC horror panel. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm horrible. I'm like, is it BIPOC or just BIPOC, or is it both?
Either one.
Either one. You have had wonderful back and forths over the years, and I always look forward to our next. And today, you threw me a curveball. You actually threw me a really big curveball just out of the blue. And yes, admittedly, because we're also trying to avoid crossing the line. But fortunately, because this one is another one that was produced by Charles Band. So this one, I think we can skirt the line on this one, but also kind of works because recently I've been delving into the works of the great Stuart Gordon. We are talking about the severely underappreciated, unsung, and yet strikingly whimsical Dolls.
That's right.
Yeah. So to begin, since this is your first time on What's in the Podcast, I'm always thrilled to ask this question. Tell me your origin story. What got you into horror?
Oh man, that is a very complex, long story, but I'm gonna try to shorten it. I always try to shorten it as much as I can. But it started as it started when I was a kid. I mean, my first horror movie was The Thing that I remember. I was around 4 years old, probably 4 or 5, somewhere up in there. I was forced to watch it by my parents. They were like, "You're gonna watch it." Forced because
my parents have forced me to watch that.
Yep, I had the kind of parents like if they catch you with a cigarette, they'll make you smoke the whole pack. I think so, but I don't think they were, if they caught me with a cigarette at 4 years old, I hope they wouldn't have done anything like but yes, they were watching a movie in the living room, and I was in the room with my sister and her friend, and I wanted to see what they were doing, and I kept sneaking out in the living room, and they said, "Okay, fine, you won't listen, you're going to watch it." And I didn't know what it was, at all. I was just being a kid, being nosy, because I like to be around my dad as well. My dad was like very special to me, and they sat me between them and they pressed play on the VCR. I remember the scene just so vivid. It was when it was Copper was trying to revive Norris,
Ah.
and the chest and the stomach burst open and teeth, and he lost his arms, and that whole scene, all the way up to, I watched all the way up to when Norris's head start crawling across the floor
Oh,
with the spider legs. And I
yeah.
kept trying to cover my eyes, and they would say, they would hold my hands down. No, you're going to watch it, because you kept sneaking in here. And I watched it up to that point, and I couldn't take it anymore. I was screaming and crying, and it was like, now go in the room. You learn your lesson.
We'd say go to bed, but let's face it, you're
Yeah.
not going to bed after that.
No, I was not. I was scared. But it was a normal thing. That was a normal thing. I would not that, but watching horror, going to the movies as a family, and going to see horror movies. I mean, we saw all kinds, from fantasy, sci-fi to scary. I mean, I can remember going to see in the theater was Aliens. I saw that at the drive-in, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I saw also Evil Dead 2 at the drive-in when it came out. So I am so lucky.
You are.
To see those two. I've seen The Blob, I've seen Ghoulies. The Ghoulies got me because I didn't see I saw the first one, but I saw the second one at the theater. And it was a walk-in theater, and that scared me because I was afraid to use the bathroom, because I just knew it was going to get me.
And you know what? It's actually kind of wonderful that you bring up that particular one, because notoriously the shot of the ghoulie coming out of the toilet was not originally in the movie. It's just from the advertising campaign of that famous poster of the ghoulie poking his head out of the toilet. They get you in the end. And they're like, why isn't this in the movie? This needs to be in the movie. And so they actually did. That's where they filmed that insert shot. Now I bring that up. That's wonderful, because DOLLS actually had a similar story happen, because for those who do not realize, DOLLS is one of those movies that I remember when I was a kid, going through those great mom and pop video stores, like the ones that had that section with the curtain that you're going, what's in there? It's like, you can't go in there. The horror section, I'll maintain to this day, horror still has the best box art of any box art in the history of box art. DOLLS had one of the best posters of all time that creeped me out, where the image of the doll without the eyes, but they're holding the eyes in the hands. That poster was so designed, was so striking, that it's the same situation. They're like, we got to make sure that this is in the movie, and they worked it in. So that's kind of wonderful how that all worked around. So we kind of brought it back to that. So after Ghoulies, you were pretty much. After Ghoulies, The Thing, Evil Dead, you were pretty much.
Well, I mean, I've seen all kinds of, Pet Cemetery in the theater, The Blob in the theater, the remake in the theater was scary. Because I was like,
oh
my God. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, it's coming to get us.
Especially because it kills the kid. And, I mean, that's
The Fly. I saw that in the theater. Yeah. So it was a normal, I don't know. It was just a normal thing, going to VHS stores on Friday and Saturday night, getting some hamburgers at the local, those were the real like mom and pop burger stands where they had arcade games and everything. The seasoning salt on the fries, like ranch dressing. Or we get pizza, we get snacks. I mean, you could take $1 to the store and actually get some good stuff. Like that kind of says how old I am, but anyway, those were good times. And and then we just sit around or turn off all the lights, put pillows on the floor, and there you go. Now this DOLLS was something else. That one, I can't remember how I got across it as a kid, but I did, and it made me afraid of dolls. Even to this day, I do not like porcelain dolls.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. I remember one time Lynn and I were visiting Lynn's parents, and it was like, I think it was the first time I'd been there to meet them for the first time. So we were staying over, opened up the door, lo and behold, a whole cadre of porcelain dolls. And I was like,
no, I'll be going right back out.
well, I'm glad that at the time I had not been converted to horror and had not seen dolls at that time. Because actually, okay, we may have to get into it later, but funny enough, I actually think the movie, for me, dolls had kind of the inverse effect. I actually think it kind of cured me of that particular phobia. And it's going to be fun to get into when we get into it, but I think we may, but I don't want us to get too ahead of ourselves. So this film is directed by the great Stuart Gordon, but he was also co-produced by Brian Usna, who has been Stuart Gordon's longtime collaborator, and also written by Ed Naha, who later on would go on to pretty much be the creative force behind the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids franchise. Yeah, you weren't expecting that, did you? No, I didn't either when I looked him up on IMDb. And just because it's very seldom I ever get a chance to do this, the cast includes Ian Patrick Williams, Caroline Purdy Gordon, Stuart Gordon's wife, Carrie Lorraine, Guy Rolfe, Hilary Mason, Bunty Bailey, Cassie Stewart, and Stephen Lee. It's very seldom I get a chance to basically name off the entire cast of a movie, because that is the entire cast of the movie right then and there. So to start, give us a brief synopsis of Dolls.
Oh, wow. A brief synopsis. So it's basically some people, it was Judy, her parents, her dad, her stepmother were on their way to somewhere. I can't even remember. On their way to somewhere, but they got stuck, and they meet up at a house with the longest night in the world. And they meet an old couple who are doll makers. And they had the longest night of their lives because people end up missing and turning into some strange things. Dolls. I mean, that is just, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So you said you saw this one for the first time like ages ago, and then you just revisited it recently?
Yeah, it's one of those I don't watch often. So I watched it a long time ago, and then I rewatched it a couple of weeks ago, and then I kind of let it play as I was doing some other stuff. And still to this day, I was like, I don't like dolls. Like, it just made it clear for me that I still doesn't like dolls at all.
And by dolls, you just don't like the toy doll, not the movie.
Oh no, not the. Oh yeah, I love the movie. It's it was like, what? No, let me make that clear. I forget the name is Dolls. I just do not like the toy because
the toy.
They're little people. Literally.
Yeah. With the permanent smile on their face. That's always freaky to me. And another thing we all have to remember, this movie came out in 1986 during the height of the Cabbage Patch riots, like in the midst of that. So people were going crazy over those cherubic little abominations that just so I don't know if I know Chucky was kind of like a commentary on that, but I don't know what their thought process was in developing Dolls, but I'm wondering if they had that in mind, because you had all these kids brandishing these dolls with these like these faces.
My niece was obsessed with those. She collected them, and I couldn't stand them.
Horror movies were forbidden fruit in my house, so I wasn't able to be allowed to watch a lot of them. So, but this one always stood out to me on the shelves because of that cover. But recently, In Search of Darkness showcased this movie, and once I realized that Stuart Gordon made it, I immediately prioritized jumping on it as soon as I saw it available on one of the streaming services. So what was your first reaction when you watched this movie?
Oh, when I was a kid, I was terrified. I was scared. I believe they were real. Um, I don't know. It was very scary to me because it was I think it was the dialogue, what they were saying too, especially the old man when he was
Um,
saying,
Gabriel Hartwick.
Gabriel, yeah, he was saying, especially that scene where they were walking, like he was taking the after they eat and stuff like that. But there was this particular scene where Judy was downstairs and they were talking. It was with him and also with Ralph, and they have this conversation about, dolls coming to life and things like that. And I used to think that as a kid, I used to
Mhm.
think little elves and when you go to
Yeah.
sleep, before I saw the movie. I used to think that. And so when he said that, kid, you're a kid, you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so I was like, oh my God, is it true? But when she was like, tell me where the elves live, he said, when, when Gabriel was like, elves live wherever they want. And Ralph had that, like, he was happy that he thought about it after he told his story. And then you see the dog legs move in the basket. I would have been out of there. That
Oh.
that scared me, and I think it continued on throughout the
Mhm.
film. So
So
yeah.
so when you revisited it like way down the line, like a couple of weeks ago, and so I'm assuming that was the first time you'd revisit it in a long time. So, well, when you finally did revisit it,
Uh-huh.
were the same feelings there, or did you have a completely different perception as you revisited it?
That's 50 it was like a 50-50 of it. I was like, this is still creepy. I still don't
Uh,
like dolls. The other part is like, it's fake. Like, I'm an
yeah,
adult
yeah.
now, I know, but it was like the realism of the film. There
Yeah.
was no CGI or nothing like that. So everything that was moving.
Mhm.
And it was just fascinating how realistic, and even like when she was running up the stairs because she was looking at something, the lights went out. He was like, you're afraid of the dark. When Gabriel was talking to Judy, she was like, I'm afraid what's in the dark. And I'm still like that. I
Mhm.
have to have a nightlight, in
Yeah.
some way, because I'm still like, I don't, it's not getting me. Yeah, I don't hang my feet off the bed. All my limbs gotta be under the covers. And it's
Yeah.
like I'm an adult and I know please, there's no such thing as a monster under the bed, but there's still that kid in me, um that
Mhm.
no, I'm not taking any chances.
Yeah.
So revisiting that, it was still that kid in me that was looking at this like, okay, dolls appearing, looking, blinking, walking, giggling. Like it still was frightening in some way. I don't know. It was so weird.
Yeah, that's fantastic. See, for me, I didn't see it until only like a year or two ago, when I saw that Stuart Gordon had directed it, and the fact that it's practically a lot of the Reanimator crew
Mm,
working on this. I immediately jumped on this. So I didn't have that set preconception or anything
mm,
like that for this one. So I went into this one with entirely fresh eyes. The first immediate thing I took away from it was that this is a fairy tale. It is a bona fide, like, gothic fairy tale, but not based on anything. It's entirely its own thing. And I actually got choked up in bits in this. I didn't expect to get choked up on this movie. And it doesn't go narratively. I mean, granted, it kicks off with Judy, with her stepfather, with her father and her stepmother, who are just odious.
they're
Just
horrible.
odious people. I mean, they're already right out of the gate just verbally abusing her, throwing away her bear, just doing, and pretty much like praying against, praying that he no longer has to pay child support or have visitation with her. So you already it's a very brief movie. It only runs at like 75 minutes, and yet it's does the job. It's a lean, mean 75 minutes that does its job because all the characters are kind of, I want to say either caricatures, but they're very broad. And I think that's a deliberate choice. So that way you don't need to know a lot about them from their history. You just need to know what kind of people they are. And that's enough to kind of carry you through the movie. But I did not expect that this movie that has a lot of this horrific imagery that you have talked about, I did not expect it to have a level of poignancy and sweetness to it, which I did
Yeah.
not expect.
Yeah, it really it does. Like there were some, like I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like it the point where it needs to be. But also watching it as with an adult set of eyes, I noticed some things about it that was disturbing. And
Yeah.
it wasn't it was partly the dolls in the movie, but it was the abuse. Like
Yeah.
her stepmother Rosemary and her dad were so abusive. You could tell he beat Judith
Yeah.
Judy. Like at some point,
Yeah.
you know, he hits her, and at some point he did, but then it was like Rosemary was like, he may not be able to hit you, but I sure can. And I was
Yeah.
just like, why? And there was a part in the line when the car got stuck when they were driving, where she was talking, and he said, the dad said to the kid, I'm gonna kill that kid. Now, not to her, but she can hear it
Yeah.
because the
In
window was
earshot.
down. Yeah. And Rosemary was like, stand in line. And I was just like, wait a minute.
Ah.
See, when I was a kid watching, it didn't register that. But
Mhm.
watching with the adult set of eyes, I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So you actually are meant to not like them to the highest degree. So when
Yeah.
it plays out, you're just like, good riddance. But
Oh
it
yeah.
was so abusive verbally to Judy. And then, I mean, I could understand why her imagination was like, because I was like that. I used to have imaginary friends and all these
Mhm.
things. And I understood. That's why I think it's so fun, so interesting to rewatch movies that you watch as a kid, because there are
Yeah.
always some kind of hidden message or an understanding or, something, an underlying story. And it just felt like this kid was being abusive. She had to think of an imaginary friend, and
Yeah.
her dad just hate her mother. And you could tell that the mom, because I believe they were dropping off the kid in order
Yeah.
to take her a vacation or whatever they had going on. But it was
Mhm.
just really tragic,
Yeah.
and we
And it's
actually
like,
see her get hit.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I will say flat out, the child they cast, Carrie Lorraine,
Mhm.
they and apparently she beat out like 100 kids to get this part, but they could not have cast it better. They picked a girl who was able to convey that level of sadness just in a forlorn look. I mean, this is a person who looks like they are living a life that would probably be would force her to grow up in an environment that she's probably not ready to handle, to the point she seems like the kind of person who would have fantasies of her teddy bear becoming a big giant feral beast and ripping her parents apart en masse.
Mhm.
But I love but the core thing for me, a bit of very sad background for myself. This one kind of hit me hard in another aspect. Unfortunately, my mother was someone who firmly believed that when I crossed a particular age, that I needed to throw away my toys, not put away, throw them away.
Mhm.
So she flat out told me to throw them away, get rid of them, like immediately. She was that kind of person. She pretty much flat out said, you know, fuck your childhood. You need to grow up now. You don't need this bullshit. And and I immediately clicked with Judy because I was like going, these are parents who basically just don't want to be bothered with letting this child like cultivate some kind of imagination or some kind of joy of all the wonderful things in life that can inspire her to do amazing things. So as when they arrive at this house and they meet Gabriel and Hillary Hartwick, and the idea, and practically immediate. Now, in any other movie about killer dolls, they would vilify the shit out of the doll makers.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they would. But even though these dolls are doing crazy, bloody, psychotic things, I was actually kind of, there was always a part of me going, I'm on your side all the way. Kill these people. Sorry, these people are awful. But even then, I like that they came from a place where the people they're killing are not good people, and they're doing it because these people are kind of killing the idea of innocence and the idea of joy, like any kind of legitimate joy out of life. That's why when Stephen Lee, who plays Ralph, when Ralph comes onto the scene and he's bringing in these two women who are like fawning over him because like very clearly they're going to roll him, but Ralph is so blissful, so oblivious to their advances because he's just a big old child at heart kind of thing. I just love the movie hammers in the message from the beginning, and you'd think you get tired of it, but I didn't, because the message is so sweet natured and so pure. The idea of never losing that child, like the inner child, never losing touch with it, and always embrace it. And I love the fact that in the midst of this movie, where we have dolls stabbing each other, poking out eyes, shooting them.
Yeah.
I love the fact that message still comes through with the right amount of poignancy, and yet never loses the impact of everything else that obviously they wanted to have in the movie to make it a horror film.
I also like the balance as it has, because you have Judy with her parents that are abusive and she's young. And then you have Ralph, who's an adult, that meets two people who are also, not good people themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's this young and old, like,
yeah,
you could be the sweetest person. It doesn't matter what age, you're going to have to, you at some point are going to meet people as an child, as an adult, that are going to take advantage of you and your innocence. And that's how it was. And then you have the doll makers, Hillary and Gabriel, that are in the middle, and they're kind of they're really just smack dead in the middle. Like, it's to show you that no matter what happens, you have a choice. And now the whole thing was a choice. Everyone had a choice which way they were going to go. And they even say that we give everyone a choice that comes to their place by accident, which is so. And there was also some little things that you had to pay attention to. Especially when Judy and her dad and her stepmom, when they were walking in the rain after, she was like daydreaming, he said, "Come on, short stuff." And I didn't notice that that's a trigger for something that he and her had as a bond, to understand who her dad was, that he did have a part of him that was non-abusive, very caring, but he chose the lifestyle, the money, the whatever fortune, and because it was Rosemary that was also the influence that was giving him, because obviously he probably wasn't like that with the mom, not necessarily, but something between her and her mom and him, it just didn't work out because he chose the life. And it was in the whole film is just about choosing the path of greatness or failure. Because we see that with the hitchhikers, we see that with Rosemary and her dad. So I just thought that was such an interesting thing, because I see it with an adult set of eyes now.
And I think the major reason I love Ralph is that he's a person who, at the second he arrives there, he's enchanted because it's tapping into a part of him that he probably was forced to suppress. And it's very clear that's that aspect of him that made him this very sweet, and yes, naive, because he picks up these two hitchhikers who very clearly were intending to probably roll him, and they brings them to this house, and what do they promptly do? They start casing the place and try to steal from him. So it's very clear that he's someone who had a very pleasant, happy childhood, who's very in touch with his innocence, but because he's probably was like, well, you got to grow up, you got to be responsible, you got to be an adult, he probably lost touch with it. So I think he got something there where it's the idea of these two people from opposite ends of life, someone who is already being confronted with horrible reality, trying desperately to hold on to her childlike innocence. And then you have another person who obviously embraced it, but as he grew older, just naturally distanced himself from it. And I love that this all becomes this big old epicenter where both of them are figuring out the right way, figuring out through this series of events that they are embracing, finding a new way to embrace it, but also through that innocence, they wind up surviving the night, but also come out on the other side potentially better people.
That's why I think that conversation is so important when when Gabriel was supposed to, everybody was getting their room, and he took the two girls for their room, and and Judy's parents. But when he could have taken to their room, but I think Gabriel was trying to figure out where Ralph's head was.
Yeah.
Because even though he came there and you could hear the dialogue between him and the two girls and the hitchhikers or whatever, but it was like, let me take him out of the situation and see where he is, to see what choices he was going to make. So is he going to be the choice of my dolls coming to get him or save him? And so sometimes, and I think that goes in real life, because you could be in a situation where you have no choice with the attitude or whatever choice you make down the line. But if you are given the opportunity to be taken out of a bad situation or the influence or the bad influence, are you different? And I think that was the morality that Gabriel was trying to figure out, because he knew who Judy was. Judy knew who she was. She was a good kid with terrible parents. But what is Ralph? So taking him downstairs to have a conversation where he talked about the dolls, and he would put cookies out and how it was with his parents and stuff like that. And he realized, oh, you got to grow up. You can't be like this. And then Gabriel said, well, why?
Yeah,
you could still be an adult, but you could still be a child at heart. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that was important. So then when Gabriel took him, to drop him off and everything, it was like, okay, he's a good guy. The dolls don't come and attack this man.
And that's what I'm thinking. And the time the dolls actually do dogpile on him to try almost to kill him, it's just because he's panicking. He's trying to rationalize everything, and he also sees that these dolls have indeed killed other people. His adult rational brain's gonna say these things are automatically evil. But I love, because he listens to Judy, because he actually treats Judy like a person, actually treats her like a human being, and is actually willing to, he actually holds back. And that's the thing that winds up saving them, because the adult takes the time to listen to the child. And the fact that the child has already, just through her own natural innocence, just her wide-eyed curiosity and her enthusiasm, already understands what these dolls are all about. And all she really just had to do was to convince Ralph that that's what it needed to be. So
I also think when Gabriel gave Judy Mr. Punch, I think Mr. Punch wasn't just a doll that she can walk around and carry there. I think Mr. Punch was a watcher. He
absolutely
wanted to, he couldn't, Gabriel couldn't stand with her in her room and watch her. That'd be weird. Hillary can't do that. So
Hillary couldn't either.
I think Mr. Punch was always given to the child. various punches, every time a situation happened. And he was to see, it was his eyes. It was Gabriel's eyes to watch, to see how the parents are, how everyone is, that she interacts with, how they interact with this child. And then the message gets sent out. Because like, even though he gave them, hey, you could stay in this room and get dry and stuff like that, they still had a choice because they could have been offed right then and there. But I think that's when the two girls, Isabel and I think it was Enid, decide.
Enid and Isabel,
yeah. Isabel was like, talking to the old lady and try to get an idea of what's valuable and stuff like that. And there were dolls in there. And see, Enid had a choice too. Isabel was like, I'm going to go and rob. And Enid was like, nah, I'm good. And I think that saved her at some point. Yeah, because when they spread it out, when she did her thing, the dolls went after Isabel. They could have went after Enid, but they didn't. But she had a choice. But once Isabel did what she had to do, I think that was kind of like your fair game because they broke her radio.
Oh, we loved our radio. We loved our radios back then. We loved them so hard. We put them over our heads to woo people in stalker fashion. I'm sorry. With all due respect to say anything, that's stalker behavior.
Yeah.
I just ruined that movie for everybody. So, well, there's a lot of fun aspects of the production on this one. Well, actually, it's impressive Stuart Gordon did this one. He was in pre-production on From Beyond around the same time that he was doing this one. But yet this one, because of all the special effects surrounding the dolls, it actually didn't get released until after From Beyond came out because the work on bringing the dolls to life was so intricate that it took forever to finally get this one seen. And a lot of it's done with stop motion, but they did do some puppeteering effects. And they said the puppeteering was horrible, especially in the scene where the dolls dogpile on Ralph, because unfortunately in some shots you could see the puppeteer's hands.
Well, it just adds a little fun to it.
Yeah, exactly. You were never a doll person when you were a kid. What did you play with?
Oh man, I wasn't a doll person, but I was My Little Pony, Voltron, He-Man. I was like that.
I was definitely He-Man, Real Ghostbusters, because Real Ghostbusters merch was pretty epic. I love the Crash Test Dummies.
Oh, I remember that.
The only toys that encouraged you to break them. I thought they were awesome.
They were great. That.
So but you had that toy that you bonded with, and it was one that actually meant a lot to you. So yeah, when the time came when I had to lose mine, and unfortunately, I suppose my love of this movie really does come about just because of my own feelings of resentment towards, this is getting a little heady here right now, but because of my feelings toward my parents and the fact that they basically forced me to get rid of all the things that I loved. Admittedly, I saw a lot of myself, unfortunately, in Rosemary a little bit, so she seemed like my mom was probably the kind of person who would have like totally threw my doll out the window or my toys out the window just because they couldn't be bothered with it. So yeah, the movie had a little level of catharsis for me just because of the idea that the movie's saying you don't have to throw away the child in yourself. The idea that you can not only hold on to it, but actually embrace it and potentially make you a better person. And I'm like, I wish I had seen this movie. I think my takeaway is I wish I had seen this movie a hell of a lot sooner. A hell of a lot sooner. And funny enough, actually, talking of Rosemary, Caroline Purdy Gordon, who is a regular in Stuart Gordon movies, she was in Reanimator, in From Beyond. Well, we could call it nepotism because she is Stuart Gordon's wife, or was Stuart Gordon's wife.
But she's good though. She could play a bitch really well. And she's frightening, even when she's not. When she's trying to be reasonable, she still comes off like just like like
And the thing that's even funnier is that she has the most violent death in the entire movie. And this is a movie directed by her husband. And he is like having dolls like cut her hamstrings, like stab her to death, and freaking launch her out the window. And
yeah,
it's like,
I couldn't get that scene when she was like, I'm gonna jump over you, and she just kept going. I was like, wait a minute.
and this is in the same year that she's in another movie where Jeffrey Combs sucks her eyeball out with his mouth. It's like,
I think she likes playing those
Yeah.
roles because
Yeah.
I think
oh,
so.
she I believe she actually said this was one of her favorite roles that she ever played. So I think you're definitely right on that account. Actually, another actress of note is Hilary Mason, who played Hillary in the film. Apparently she was, I still haven't seen the film yet, but apparently she was in Don't Look Now. And that was what got her, and apparently that's what scored her the role, because they wanted her in this movie because they love Don't Look Now. So that was definitely a big win. After I saw this movie, immediately I kept telling people, it's like, here's a good question. Ere you run into a situation where people with kids want to get their kids into horror, what's the youngest age you would go to show kids this film?
This film?
Yeah.
7.
That's a really good number.
The reason because Judy was 7.
Yeah.
And the girl who played Judy, I believe she was around that same age. I think she was around 7 or 8 when she played her. And when I first saw this, I believe I was around probably 8. Or 7, because I remember seeing it really young, like VHS, blow, put it in. It wasn't, I wasn't like 10 or anything, because I was watching Nickelodeon. Like I started getting into Nickelodeon. So, but I remember watching this very young. And yeah, I would say that because her level of reasoning as a 7-year-old was something I had, because my dad died when I was around 7, 6.5, 7. And what people don't understand, that kids at that age, even though their minds are still developing, they're well aware of what's going on and understand what you are doing. If you're hurting them, if this is wrong and this is right. And even though she was giving a script to read and say, it was so interesting, because as a kid, at that age, when I was watching this and what I was going through, I understood what death was. I understood what pain was, and that's not right, and all this stuff. So that's what I'm saying. Like 7 for this type of movie is actually a good age, because then the kids could see a 7-year-old playing in the movie who has a vivid imagination and all this stuff. And you have one at that time. I mean, you have him, earlier, but it's relatable. Like, oh, I could understand. I could understand what Judy is saying, because she is 7. The real in the movie, and the girl, I think the girl that played her was around that same age too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And actually, and admittedly, one of the sweetest things they did for her was during the scene when she's fantasizing about the big old bear. She said of everything else that they were doing on that movie, the one thing that scared her was just the special effects of the giant teddy bear turning into the feral bear. That was the one thing. But that was the only thing that freaked her out. But they took the time to actually like show her, no, this is all. They showed her how it was done. So that way she would be like traumatized by the whole affair. But honestly, I'm definitely with you there as well, because that's also the age when, and also I would even encourage kids to watch this totally unedited, frankly, because to me, I think this is a modern, about as close I think most modern storytellers actually get to replicating Grimm's fairy tales, because it's a very, as much as it is a horror story, as much as it does have kills with blood and gore, it still has a very sweet nature, very innocent moral to it, with a very, and the best part is the score of the movie. I believe Richard Band did the score for this one as well. They really were able to bring out the right, they were able to know what you wanted to feel for this movie. And I feel like because it has this very strong fairy tale slant, you're right, 7 is a great age to show to kids, because it's at that point when kids are kind of moving out of the Disney fairy tale, nothing horrible. Ariel doesn't feel like she's stepping on glass every time she walks, like Disney tells you, when in reality, that's what the Hans Christian Andersen story actually is. Yeah, that's a different thing. But this would be the kind of fairy tale you would give to a kid, where it shows where, dark things are afoot, but through prevailing innocence, you can still come out of it just by being true to yourself, which is a very good, strong moral to have.
Not only does the music kind of indicate what to feel, but I think the dolls, they're not attacking innocent people.
Yeah.
They're not attacking Judy at all. So they only attack those who are mean to Judy.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of helps with, if you're watching this as a kid, you're not afraid of them, because they're trying to protect you from harm. And I think that was something that was important, even though it is a frightening, creepy, scary movie for that time. But it also was saying, kids, like, if you're being harmed or something like that, you have this to protect you. The things like this will stop that pain. That's kind of how I would put it. That's why I think a 7-year-old would probably understand this better than most adults.
I would definitely say this is a movie that I think the parent should sit with the child and watch. Absolutely.
Well,
because I think it would, well, to me, I think it would lead to a really good conversation that the parent can have with the child afterwards.
I say, yeah, you can, but I grew up with no parent watching. Most of my parents, not I was forced. Remember, I was forced.
Yeah.
But I did watch certain movies at the theater with my parents, because one, I was too young, to get a ticket. But at the same time, I watched a lot without my parents. So I don't know. I think it's just a level of how your kids are growing up and how your parents are. I mean, you could sit with them. You don't have to sit with them. I mean, it's a good idea to sit with them, but I turned out okay, because 99% of the time I didn't have my parents sitting with me.
Yeah.
So I guess it just depends. It just depends.
It really does. I mean, on my side, though, because my parents didn't, and anytime I did, like, get a whiff of any kind of horrible things or anything, when I was a kid, unfortunately, I joke to this day, but movies like Terror Vision freaked me out as a little kid, because there was no one there to to watch the movie with me, to kind of like assure me that, this is cool, or basically there was no safe space for me to enjoy the movie. Instead, I'm seeing a movie where a big ass slimy monster eats a kid at the end of it. That's why the Blob remake freaked me out, because apart from the fact that thing just ate everything in sight in spectacularly, wonderfully grotesque fashions, but in the midst of it, a kid gets brutally killed in that movie.
I mean, most 80s and 90s movies, everybody was fair game.
Yeah,
everybody.
and I've gone on tirades about why we definitely should not flinch at the prospect of going there. But I can appreciate that. But in a movie like Dolls, I think this is the one time where I had absolutely no worry whatsoever that Judy was in any kind of real danger. Well, ironically, the only real danger that she was in was from her own father, which I thought was, which when we get to the final climax, when it's all down to her father versus Mr. Punch, I find it interesting. I find it interesting that the only real danger that she's in is from the people she arrived with, which I thought was kind of fascinating. I mean, she's this innocent observer, tries to get people to listen to her. The one person who can has some roadblocks he's got to kind of get through. But ultimately, the only real person that's an actual physical threat to her is the person who, frankly, should not be. So, admittedly, for me, I kind of telegraph a lot of my own childhood issues onto this movie because I kind of see because I kind of see a lot of my parents in Judy's parents. Now, admittedly, there wasn't physical, but there was definitely a lot of emotional from them. And I kind of saw a lot of that. So this movie kind of hit me when I finally sat down and watched this only a couple of years ago. I turned 40, and yet this movie still hit me in ways I didn't expect. So
when I watched it as a kid, I could relate to Judy.
Yeah.
Watching it as an adult, I am Ralph. I am Ralph right now. And I understood, like, I completely understood Ralph. You're an adult, you're an adult, you're an adult body, so you can't be acting a certain way, but it's part of you. You can't, like, you are this kid at heart who love toys, who love games, who's funny, who crack jokes. I mean, we saw that throughout when he was in his I think the moment we were supposed to, like, there was a test. The entire thing was not, I believe it wasn't about Judy. I think it was Ralph, because Judy, we know Judy's a kid and she's a kid at heart, period. I think the test was for Ralph, because as soon as he came in, it was like, Gabriel was like, I'm going to separate him from all this. I'm going to talk to him. I want to test him. He's in there sitting there with a clown sitting at him. That clown's not just sitting there just to sit there. That clown is there to watch him. They're watching him. And then when he started joking with the clown, that clown could have strangled him when he turned over. Like, you know what I mean? To go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, but Judy found safety in Ralph. She went in there after she saw what she saw. Poor Isabel.
Yeah.
She went to Ralph. She could have went to her parents, but she knew, like, Ralph was safe. She pulled his toe. He screamed, and she was like, hey, I saw one of them girls get dragged off, and he believed her. He walked around, they looked for it, and they saw this blood or whatever. And at first he didn't believe her. It was like, this child is crazy. But then he saw the blood on her shoe. He was like, oh my God, let me go check. And he actually got up and went around to check. And that's when it was like, they go up these stairs and poor Isabel. Oh my gosh. But I mean, it's just, I think the entire test was Ralph, because and I think that scene with him in the room with those dolls was the ultimate test. It's like, because it wasn't that, I don't think it was by accident. He was led there because they wanted to see. Gabriel and Hillary wanted to see, and he was led there. So when he walked in that room, and it was like, oh man, look at all these dolls. And what triggered the adult in him was, hello, all you little people. And he was like, wait a minute. Hold up. And that was the trigger of the adult part in him. And but then it was like, no, he's not that bad. It was just, he's still an adult.
He's still an adult. He hasn't, that scene in that, I got something to say about that whole thing. You go right ahead.
Okay. It scared me as a kid. I was terrified, but I was laughing as an adult because I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. So they go in this room. So after they're trying to find Isabel, we see what happened to Isabel. They don't see, because their backs are turned in the lightning flash. He falls down the stairs. Ouch. and blah, blah, blah. So they find this room. They find this room, and inside this room, he is happy because he see all these toys. Judy says, "Hello, you little people," and he's like, "Are you talking about these little people that are alive?" And she said, "I guess so." And he's like, you see all this laughing. See, I would have ran too. Yeah. That's the adult. Let me get out of here. But anyway, so that's understandable. But the part that was like, come on now. Okay, after they attacked him, she was like, "Stop, you're hurting him." When he was laid out and she was protecting him, and he was like, "What's going on?" And you got the 4 dolls chatting to see what they were going to do with him.
Yeah.
Right there in front of both of them. Like, we don't care what you think. We're going to discuss and to see what they're doing. Now, it is stop motion time.
Yeah.
You see them talking and discussing like this, like, it's like, yeah. Oh my God. But what got me was that one doll. It was the one doll, the sailor was not having it. He was just frowning. And then you have the one with the hat. It was like a leopard print hat that was looking like what so what y'all gonna do? And then you have the one that was the cowboy that was like,
yeah.
And then you had the one next to him that was just like, whatever. Their expressions were telling you who's going to go with what. But that sailor, I was like, look at him. He was just frowning. Like, he was like, I ain't going for this shit. Off with his head. He was the only one.
Man, Shipwreck from G.I. Joe ain't got shit on him.
I was laughing. Like, oh my God, look at their expressions. I mean,
well, and it's actually kind of fascinating because one reveal that happens in this movie is that there comes a point, I think it's when Judy's dad is in a fight with one of them. He breaks one of them, and you actually see what appears to be a miniature desiccated corpse inside the head of the doll, which hints at the idea that maybe not all of them, but some of them are the loads of people who've come across this place and obviously made some pretty bad decisions, which led to them to this predicament. So that begs a question about Gabriel and Hillary. What do you think their story is? Because they actually do a great job not revealing a lot about what they actually are, like the true nature of them. So what do you think they are?
I think their story is they are witches. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you watch it with the adult set of eyes, you catch on to things. And he was like, "You old witch." And she was like, "Oh, he figured it out." And I was like, lucky. He was like, lucky guess.
I love that.
So
line.
They're witches and wizards. And he is a doll maker, but not in the way you think.
Yeah,
you make like none of these dolls are stuffed with cotton.
Yeah,
no, they make dolls from people who make bad decisions, who travel down that road and get their car stuck, and their car gets stuck on purpose. And every time they come out, they have an adult and a child, or two adults and a child, or however come out, because that is implied when we see towards the end. Yeah. So,
right.
But anyway, end, but I think there are just morality witches, and you know, you come there, you make a fool of yourself. Oh, we're going to keep you here, because why allow you to be in society being as cruel and evil as you are? You're not doing anything. You're hurting people. So you're going to be part of this family permanently, where you cannot leave, and we provide everything for you. So that's what I think. Because you would think, well, wouldn't the dolls go outside? They can't.
Mhm.
It's an enchanted house who causes a storm for people to get stuck, and they have
Yeah.
a choice because they are allowed to stay in their home to see, are they going to steal their stuff, are they going to beat their kids, are they going to have an attitude, or are they going to destroy stuff? And because of that, that is a choice you make. So stay here forever and suffer the consequences of being a doll forever. They
Yeah.
are little people. They're not fake dolls.
Yeah. And it takes you to wonder, maybe, the cowboy doll, the sailor doll. What if this was their actual vocation? What if these were people who actually were these things when they passed by?
Mm-hmm.
That there was no costuming here at all. That this is what they turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be kind of wild. And actually, this leads to a kind of an interesting segue. They did ponder the possibility of doing a sequel to this film, where
I heard of that a
yeah,
long time ago.
yeah, but instead of it being just this is another group that stumbles upon their home, what this one would have been, it would have continued to follow Judy and Ralph. Uh, it Basically, Judy would introduce Ralph to her mom, and they would hit it off. And somewhere down the line, Judy ends up receiving a package of Gabriel and Hillary in doll form,
Mm.
and they didn't really go beyond that. And it never really saw the light of day after that initial pitch. So there's a part of me like going, I like that, because in a good sequel, you shouldn't repeat. You should try to do something different. And I liked the air of mystery about that. It's like, why are we seeing our our doll makers coming to them in doll form? What is this a summons? What is that? So who
You
knows?
know what? If there was a something, I have something to add to that, but on a different part. But if that would be very, very interesting if it
Mm-hmm.
was if there was a sequel of that, because maybe they were at a certain point of their age, they were so old that this was the only way they could keep living if they were dolls, because then you don't
Yeah.
grow. And going back to Judy, maybe it's a sign of her taking over what they have left behind. Now that
Mm-hmm.
that could be very interesting. Now, the other thing that I heard was that they were remaking, not a sequel, a remake.
Oh,
This was actually a few years, not even a few years ago. I was on a site, upcoming remakes, upcoming all this thing. And some of that was true because some of the movies came out that was on there that I had this list of. And that was one of them, that it's in talks of a full remake. I
hmm.
hope it does not happen. Not because, like, why would you do it? Because it would be completely 99% sure a CG. And it would take
Yeah.
away from everything. Um, like there was something about this one. It was so much innocence. It was creepy. It was scary. It was real. It felt
Yeah.
real because it was real in a
Yeah.
sense. And I just think trying to take something and just do something, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a
I
more
think
in depth.
no,
I have to think about
I
that one,
think
what I want to
well
say. But
well no,
um,
you're making a well, yeah, I think my major worry about remaking, yeah, CGI is one thing, but I think my other major worry, I would be worried if whoever takes the gig would not understand the assignment, you know?
yeah, yeah, I think that's
And
what I'm. Yeah.
well, and actually, here's a wonderful kind of behind the scenes thing to kind of punctuate that point. Um, Charles Band, just to kind of spice it up, to kind of add more emphasis to the horror elements, he insisted that more gore be put in, and they did film like a lot of these kills were meant to be gorier.
Mhm.
But when they all sat down, and I think all of them sat down for the final cut, and they were just like, this is kind of ruining the core of this movie by putting this much gore in it.
Mhm.
So they actually all agreed, and they took out like a lot of the more grislier elements to it. I would just be worried that there would be filmmakers who take on this assignment and not give a shit about that and would say, fuck it, let's go balls to the wall. And, killer dolls are in right now. Because
Yeah.
even in the unrated cut of Megan, to its credit, though bloody as it may be, it's not over the top bloody. It's just the right amount of bloody that it doesn't take away from the core of the story, which is why I thought Megan was such a wonderful film.
Mhm.
So I suppose if there's any director who take it, I'd say, yeah, give it to that director, but he's kind of busy now.
There's also something to say about these dolls. They don't care. The disrespect to put Rosemary in that bed was just above and beyond.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like they do not care about you. Once you cross the threshold, that is it. There's nothing else. I think Ralph survived because Judy was vouching for him. And he always protected Judy.
Yeah.
So they all stopped. The dolls was looking like, what are you talking about? Like, he is harming us and he could harm you. It's like, no, he's my friend. And I think that was something important. And also her dad, him going after Punch. And that was creepy. I mean, the facial expressions on Punch alone, but there was some little humor throughout this film because, Punch was ready to just like put this, he had that drill, but it was like he snatched that drill for Punch.
Hey, they don't call him Mr. Punch for nothing.
And in that moment when Hillary and Gabriel came down, that showed like, hey, we are doll makers, but we are a different kind, and we saw them make a doll.
Yeah.
But that lets you know how every doll, at least most of them, what we know, turned into what they are. A very painful, slow process. Well, his was really quick, but Isabel was a little slow.
Yeah. I mean, just again, and I will say, even though it's totally done because they wanted to recreate the poster, to actually see them do it on film, that image was still pretty damn potent. It was really eerie. I mean, the horror elements in the movie are on point. Stuart Gordon, he's such such an undervalued director. I mean, he did so much good work in his entire career, and I don't think anyone, I mean, on high, I think the people on high just completely took for granted what that guy was able to do. And it's like, dude, look what this guy did with glow sticks and Jeffrey Combs, on a meager budget. Let him make his big fish people epic. He could have made it before Guillermo del Toro made it sexy. In the short time he made Reanimator, From Beyond, Dolls, and all that, he really did show what a versatile director he is, capable of doing drastically different kind of stories with every single one he did. So, and I think it was actually, and even though I loved From Beyond when I watched it for the first time, it was really Dolls to me that solidified my love of this man's work, because it was such a drastically different departure from those prior two examples. So I guess on this final note, I think we've really kind of, for a 75-minute movie, I think we really kind of went deep into this sucker.
That monologue, because I even wrote here, like the monologue, Gabriel explains how and why they turned so many people into dolls. I think that's a very, very important monologue, and it made a lot of sense. And I mean, this film is such a classic. It's one of my favorites in the way of the story. It is creepy. It is a beginner film for kids if they're trying to like, what, I want my kid wants to watch horror movies, but I'm not going to watch them Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Can you help me out? So this is, I think I've suggested this movie a few times. I even suggested Evil Dead 2 because there's a lot of humor in that one, except for the outside scene with the But anyway,
Well,
but that was
fortunately,
more
that
a little older. But other than
yeah,
that, Dolls is one of them. Critters, like I just try to find
yeah,
something that's like a little cheesy, way a
yeah.
lot of cheese for the kids. But then it's kind of hard because I was thrown into horror. Good luck. That was me, and I
Yeah,
turned out okay, sort of. But yeah, it's a great film. It
I think
is.
so too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for everyone who has not seen this film, to date, for as of recording, I've checked. It is currently on Prime and it is on Tubi at the present time. So definitely check it out there. It was on Shudder briefly, but it is not anymore, which is a damn shame. So with all that in mind, Ivotres, go ahead and tell us where we can find you.
Well, you can find me on YouTube, TikTok, X, formerly known as Twitter,
I
and
just call it Twitter.
yeah, and Instagram. And you just type in, horror movies and beyond, and I pop up on Google.
Mhm.
So yeah,
All
that's
the
where you can
time.
find me.
And yeah, and did I think I saw recently you did an interview with Orlando Jones recently?
Yeah, that was um about a few weeks back. Orlando Jones and the director for was it Till Death Do Us Part. That was a chance
Hmm.
because he was one of the actors, and I was like, can I interview him? And they went to check, and you just never know. You never
Yeah.
know. Just ask. The worst thing that people could say is no, or don't say
Yeah.
anything at all. Just move on to the next. And that was a great opportunity. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, I interviewed Casper Van Dien. That was a
Yeah.
third time. That was a third time, second time interviewing him, the third time talking to him.
Hmm.
And I end up being friends with his wife now. So
Oh,
you never know how life, I mean, I don't know. You
take
just keep going.
you just kind of dare to take the plunge.
I take leaps now. I'm at the age where I
Yeah.
just, if I see something that it benefit me or an opportunity, I just leap. I just do it. That's how I interviewed George Greg Nicotero. Greg Nicotero. That's how
Ah,
I interviewed him last year.
yeah.
I just went for it. That
Yeah.
was, and he was the sweetest guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait. And also, your interviews with actually with Damian Rogna and Eduardo, was it Eduardo
Oh yeah.
Sanchez or
Yeah.
on
Eduardo
for Satanic
Sanchez.
Hispanics? Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome when I got to see that. And
Yeah.
I'm a fan. Like, all of them were great, all of them
Hmm.
had their moments, but I am a fan of Damien Rugna. I
Yeah.
love his storytelling. And
I
even Eduardo Sanchez told him, I mean, during our interview, like, dude, don't change, because you're very few of the directors that you can actually scare people, not
fuck
creep out,
yes.
scare.
Oh man.
And then finding out his dad was a healer slash witch, and then you go back and
A
watch his
brujo?
films. Huh?
A brujo?
Who? Wait, say it again.
Brujo. I believe it's well,
Oh, I don't
Spanish
know
for
the
witch.
terms.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. He said
Yeah.
witch. He said
Yeah.
witch.
Yeah, brujo is Spanish for witch.
Oh, but yeah, but he said
Yeah.
his dad was a healer witch growing up. And I was just like, so now when you watch
Wow.
Terrified, you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
wait a minute, wait a minute. And then you watch his segment in his Satanic
Satanic
Hispanics, and
Hispanic.
then I haven't seen his new film, which I get to as soon as I
Cannot
can.
wait.
And I'm
Cannot
just
wait.
like, it makes you wonder, how real is
Hmm.
this? Is it
Yeah.
truly make believe, or he's recounting, like recalling situations that he grew up with?
Yeah.
It's frightening. And now it's like,
Terrifying.
but I want to have an interview about his
Hmm.
stories, not his movies,
Yeah.
but his stories. I like, because yeah, he has to stay. Yeah, because he's like,
Yeah.
he was saying he wanted to tweak his style. I said, no, he wanted to
No.
change. I was like, no, that is
No.
no, that's what's wrong with some of these directors right now.
They
They
compromise
have
their
something. Yeah.
Yeah, they compromise their style just to conform to what the people on high demand. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you are you because you're special, you're amazing. I mean, as much as I'm looking forward to the Marvels because of Nia DaCosta directing, I'm
Mhm.
worried about, is this going to be the Nia DaCosta that did such a beautiful job on Candyman? Or is it just going to be Nia DaCosta doing the Marvel playbook?
Probably the Marvel playbook,
Yeah.
because that's a standard that you can't
Hmm.
venture from because of
Yeah.
what the audience is. There may be some parts in there, but it ain't going to be that deep.
Yeah.
No.
And yeah, that's the part that I worry about. So, but
But we have to wait
I
and
don't
see.
know.
We could be surprised, like, oh man.
Yeah.
So we have to
Anyway,
wait and see.
yeah. So, but would it be logical to say that the lesson of this film, the idea of clinging on to the things that made you, who you are from your childhood, such as from your wonderful upbringing in horror, would you say that holding on to those things that motivated you and gave you life, would you say that that's the stuff that pushed you into this extraordinary avenue that you've gone to, where you've had these incredible back and forths with all these great people?
Um, that's a tricky one. I think my trauma, not the
Mm,
good parts, it has shaped me in a way that I'm able to do what I'm doing.
gotcha.
I think so. I don't think it's the other way around,
Ah,
because I've had more trauma in my life, more heartbreak, more disasters than good. And I think because I'm able to talk to people and
mhm.
reach in areas that people are afraid of, because I went through so much, I think that helps. And I think because I'm willing to take um extraordinary chances beyond, just speaking to someone, it's like, no, I want to go deeper, to the point where people trust me and they trust having conversations with me, and they trust, even though there's an audience watching, they trust that they're they're able to I'm able to relate that of their traumas and understand their
Mhm.
feelings. Because I went through so much trauma, I'm the person that is continuously heartbroken. So I know how it feels to break someone's heart. So I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I think that shaped me in a way that I'm a good interviewer. So when I sit down
Yeah.
and talk, because I've had people tell me stories of their trauma, their guilt. I've had directors say, I felt guilty of this, so I wrote it in this, but I caught it in their work, and
Yeah.
they were able to release that. And yeah, so the opposite of the great things happening to me, and have this, family that, oh, we could see horror movies, and it wasn't like that. No, I was abused, beaten, sexually assaulted, and all these things. So when I'm watching a movie, it that it triggers that. That's how I'm able to talk about it and not afraid to talk about it, because I
Yeah.
think mental illness or mental health is important to understand. It's not always a bad thing. It's covering up. That's the bad thing. So
Yeah.
my traumas saved me and able to do this. So yeah, it's therapeutic, because I could see
Yeah.
it help. I've had people say, "Oh my goodness, I changed my life around." Or I've even had directors, like, I see their work differently. Like
Hmm.
after I've conversated with them and I see their work, it's like, oh, I see the changes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Again, and we were just talking about Stuart Gordon's dolls just about a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
But honestly, but that's kind of the extraordinary reason why, when people always say, like, the world's such a horrible place, why do you watch horror? It's like, this is why, because it's nice to know that there are filmmakers out there who may see us and may see like the things that haunt us, and the idea that there's a movie out there that in essence the filmmaker saying, we see you, and this is our way of coming to terms with our own.
That too, but sometimes, not all the time, well, most of the time, I've noticed that a story that you are watching is the director's trauma.
Yeah.
They're trying to, it's like poetry. They put it out there for the world. They tweak it because obviously they don't want you to know me, but people write what they know. People do what they know. And if you're watching a movie that is hitting you in a different way, think about who wrote it.
Yeah.
Think about who directed and interpret that. So they may have experienced what you have experienced or what is triggering you.
Yeah. I mean, so bring it back to Dolls. One could even say that Stuart Gordon, he himself may have had parents that tried to force him to put away childish things and force him to grow up. But because he held so strongly to the things that loved him, that he loved, and he motivated him, moved him to open the organic theater, and obviously embrace his love of Lovecraft to do what he did afterwards. So sorry, I feel like I was like bringing it back to all that, but
I like, have that effect on people.
no. But I was like thinking, ultimately, that's the thing that motivates any artist to want to. And since the whole crux of this podcast is also to explore the mind of the creative and why the decisions they make and why they do what they do in specific films. I think the wonderful thing about a movie like Dolls is that it does make one ponder the nature of the childhood they may have experienced and how that affected them in their in their adulthood. So it's, I think, funny enough, again, for a movie that is only a very brief 75 minutes, that was only made principally because they had a really cool poster design. It's amazing that we're getting this much meat out of it in just from the thematic material alone. So I think to wrap all this up, I'm going to dispense with my normal at end episode catchphrase, because I think we actually kind of hit into what goes on in the depths of human imagination for this one. So just very simply, everybody, follow Ivotres on Horror Movies and Beyond on all media, because frankly, she deserves your attention. And for everyone else, just ask yourself the very simple question: what's in the podcast?